welcome. My name is Jarek Stakuń. Officially it's Jarosław, but those who are Polish, they know that Jarosław is Jarek. Yeah, sorry guys. I will not do it again, sorry. Today, in my quite short presentation, actually I'm going to do something which is not typical for me, because typically I talk more about the technology, and I'm focusing mainly also on containers and Kubernetes and OpenShift, this kind of stuff. But today I want to tell you a little bit about kind of our, and not only ours, but also the wide open source community predictions about the future of developer tooling and how developers will work, I think, in quite near future. So of course we need to start with some history. So history of Red Hat is quite long, I would say. I guess you know Red Hat because of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which has been a foundation for our company. I hope you also know that Red Hat is second largest contributor in Kubernetes community. And actually we have been since the very early days of Kubernetes. So it is of course Google which started the project and who created the idea and the concept. But I think we are the leaders in terms of building and making Kubernetes enterprise ready platform. We added a lot of kind of, let's say, enterprise features to Kubernetes. For example, airbag or quota. These are the things that has been developed and added by Red Hat contributors to Kubernetes. But this is not really connected with what I want to talk about today, because the story of the things I will tell you about has started around 1.5 years ago, when Red Hat acquired a company called CodeEnvy. I don't know, anybody has heard about CodeEnvy? Nobody. That's great. So CodeEnvy has been a company that was standing behind a project which is called Eclipse-Che. Do you know Eclipse-Che? Have you heard about it? No, nobody? Cool, guys. Then my presentation might be more inspiring than I was expecting. So I will tell you later what is Eclipse-Che. But basically, CodeEnvy and Eclipse-Che is a community of people who are who gathered together to start, let's say, building or reinventing the development environments. But also, one thing is the CodeEnvy, other thing is what is happening in IT industry. So I will keep it very short. So one thing is that application architectures are changing. So this is the picture that has been, let's say, current at the time when more or less I started my work in IT. So we have been moving. One of my first project was to move from client server to 3-tier architecture application. Since then, we passed the SOA, let's say, era, which we can say failed and has been redesigned to microservices. The other layer of change is, of course, the cloud computing. So we have we are moving more and more from our data center to the public or private cloud model. So this is something what has started for me around 10 years ago, because it was the time when I heard for the first time about the cloud, which was at the time the idea of collocating some services from internal data center somewhere to the no one knows where. And then another thing which has started many years earlier than 5 years ago, but for me really it was a time when I joined when I joined Red Hat. Now it's more 6 years, but still let's keep it 5. It is the open source. So basically, open source has started growing very fast around 10 years ago. The adoption of open source at enterprises has started really at that time. And when you think about changes that are happening recently in IT, about some new ideas, I think you will agree with me that at the, currently and since last few years, most of them, or even all of them, they have an origin in open source. So the last large changes in IT that were not really driven by open source, in my opinion, this was two things. So first thing was virtualization, which is like, I don't know, 15 years ago probably. And then there was the idea of smartphones that has been developed by Apple, which I think is also around 10 years ago. And from that time, all the new things, all the new ideas like big data, like IoT, like containers, all the stuff is built around open source. So this is where really the innovation comes from. And we as a Red Hat, we are trying to basically make the open source projects. We build products from open source projects, and we are trying to make open source consumable for the enterprises. So if we take example of Kubernetes, which is hot topic, so Kubernetes on this picture will sit somewhere here with all the sub projects that we have around Kubernetes, and this is basically where all the development is happening. So there are like probably hundreds of thousands of committers from different companies who are and also independent committers who are developing the project. And the second step in this path is really to, which is basically here, is to create a platform which is still open source, still free, but unsupported and not really meant for like production systems, where we take a Kubernetes, but also we take all the tools that you need to really deploy Kubernetes in enterprise environment. So what you need for sure is the infrastructure. So you need operating system, you need storage and networking. You will also need a lot of tools to manage the life cycle of your containerized application. So you need tools to build containers, to deploy containers. You need CI/CD. Then if you think about production, you will need some tools to monitor. So to monitor the infrastructure, your containers, also to aggregate logs. And basically, if you look on those functionalities and you translate them into the projects, we can name a lot of projects. So we have here CentOS as an operating system. We are still here, so we have CentOS as an operating system. We have Gluster as a storage. We have Open vSwitch as a networking. We have Elasticsearch for logs. We have like Kibana. We have as a UI. We have then Prometheus, Grafana, and tons of other tools, Jenkins, and so on. And we put them all together here to create the project, which has been renamed recently. So it's not anymore OpenShift Origin, but now named OKD. And this is basically a foundation for our enterprise offering, which we call OpenShift Container Platform. And in our opinion, this is the right way of doing enterprise software based on the open source community development. So we keep it free, so there are no license costs. The only thing the customers are paying, they are paying for like supported version of the software if they feel like this is what they need. And this was the short story of open source, but now we like moving to the present time. So we have the DevOps, we have microservices, also the containers, and there are also some things that are changing for let's say the role of development teams is also changing in organizations. So in the past, it was quite common that developers, they had the freedom to use some tools, but they were really they had to really deploy the applications into some platforms that were basically selected by somebody else in the organization. Nowadays, this is changing. So this is what we see, that in more and more organizations, developers has the freedom to choose where they want to deploy their application, what kind of runtime for the applications they want to use. I don't want to show you some studies and the persons, how many persons of developer has that power, but it's quite a lot. And also the development itself is changing, and there are like 3 major changes that are happening. So first one is about the Polyglot. So now we have, because we have now more and more like distributed systems, we are moving from this monolith into distributed systems. So we have like freedom to use different languages, different technologies to implement different services in our distributed system. So this is called Polyglot. So you build one system, but you have freedom to use an ability to use different technologies to build different components. So you can choose what fits the best. The second change is of course about the containers. So there are more and more applications that are developed. Let's say they are container native, so they are developed from the beginning with the idea that they will be deployed and tested, and they will be deployed in production as a containerized applications. And of course, the third change, which is also happening maybe slower here in our region, but it's also a large change, is the shift into the cloud. So now we see that many production systems are moving to the cloud. But what we experience in other countries is that also the development and non-production environments are moving into the cloud. So these are the 3 things that are happening. And now the time has come to show you the 10, as we call them, big bets that we have created, how we see the development environments will be changing. So the first thing is really what I told you. So it is expected that more and more applications will be built as a container native. So it means that you will invest your time, sometimes some money as well, to build your development and your IT environments around containers, and you will build more and more applications that will be like built first, container first. And there is one exception to that could be kind of this could happen in parallel, or this might be somehow combined. So we also expect the growth of serverless functions. We don't expect that this will happen like you will move all your applications into serverless architecture, but whenever you have like event-based applications that will be some services that will react on some events, serverless might be a good option. Of course, there is a lot of interfere between the containers and serverless. So if you are close to Kubernetes, you probably heard, or you've been playing with projects like Knative or OpenWhisk. So these are basically implementation of serverless on top of containers. So Knative is the implementation in Kubernetes natively. So this is also a developing, and this will probably grow. But it's hard to say how much this will grow. I personally think it is not something that will really replace containers, or it will be just one of the options. The third thing is about the CI/CD and the agile processes. So the way how we really deploy our application into the production. So actually, I think it's true that nowadays every organization owns the process. So you use typically the common set of tools, so you have Jenkins or Bamboo or TeamCity or other kind of tools, but the process itself is really designed by your teams internally. And now, with in this statement, we expect that this will be more standardized. So there will be like more predefined processes that you will be leveraging without need to, let's say, reinvent the wheel every time when you create this kind of stuff. The fourth thing, this is about the move from. So we are expecting more and more tools that you are using as a developers that will move into the cloud. So here it is stated that it will be a public cloud. I think it will be a mix of public and private cloud. So not everybody will want to move their source code, their IDEs into the cloud. So into the public cloud. So I think also private cloud should be should be considered as an option here. Yeah. So and this is basically, I would say, the addition to the previous point. So we expect, and actually we are working on the new kind of tooling, new IDEs where there will be no need to install anything. So developer will not need to install anything on his workstation. So your workstation will be maybe even your smartphone. Yes. So everything will be running remotely. And this is the continue of the previous point. So there will be a new IDEs, web-based IDEs, so integrated development environments, and they will grow. So at some point they will become a default environment. And the change, there are two, let's say, the two layers of the change. So first change is, of course, we are expected, let's say, to save some time and money, because the IDE will be just another application running somewhere centrally on the server. But also the change here will be related to the way how we will collaborate on the source code. So if you are using Google Docs, you know that when you have one document, multiple persons can collaborate at the same time on the document, so they can make changes. And basically, those web IDEs will create the same possibility with the source code. So you will have, which can be quite funny, that a few developers at the same time will be working on the same on the same source code. Nowadays, we have tooling like JIT and so on, but still, this requires that we have like one person working on his branch, commit the change, and then somebody else picks that up and is changing. With that approach, this will be much more dynamic. So just like we have with Google Docs nowadays. So this point is about the polyglot, which I already mentioned. So because we are moving more and more into the distributed architecture, so one application consists of multiple services. So and each service is basically a separate runtime. So we expect that, and this will be supported by the technology, that each service can be written in different technologies. Of course, containers are also a great fit, because with containers you can have like common management layer, and you don't really care what's inside. You can have like consistent processes independent from the technology you are using. The 8th point is about the need to also focus not only on graphical user interfaces in your applitions, which has been a case for many years, where of course web-based applications we used to have we still have like dedicated UI developers who focus just on UI or making it better and better for the user. But there will be also there is a growing need to build an APIs and command lines, because there will be like more automation. Also, the architecture is driving the need for having the APIs, and this will also be at some point maybe even equally important to user interfaces. And the ninth point, yeah, so this is about the visibility, but we don't talk here about like having two guys checking the source code to making sure that to try to find early some issues, but this is more about having kind of control and visibility over the full process of from the idea to the deployment in production. So let's say if when this idea will become a reality, it is expected that when you will deploy to production some container, you will have a full visibility how this container has been tested and deployed, from what source code, and when this source code, why this source code has been developed, who has developed this source code, and in the beginning, what was the idea behind this specific source code or functionality that has been implemented. So full visibility across the whole process from the idea to production deployment. And this will be also driven by some regulations. So nowadays we have regulations in some industries which focus mostly on the production systems, but it is expected that there will be more and more regulations related to the process of building the applications and creating the source code. And there are some industries when this is already happening. So the one example I have heard is about the autonomous cars. So because we have already experienced that autonomous car can kill you. So all the source code and everything that happening from the idea to the deployment of this code has to be controlled as much as it can, because this is about the people's security. And the last idea, which basically contains two things. The last prediction is about the emerging of data-driven and AI-assisted coding. So what is this data-driven development here? So basically, when you develop your application, you are sitting in front of your IDE. Actually, you need to take some decisions from time to time. For example, you need to decide that, okay, I will import this library and not that library, okay? Or and there are some other decisions. And for that decisions, you don't have a data in your IDE at the moment. So you need to, let's say, go Google and find that this library is better and other is not. And the idea here is that there will be more and more this kind of data available directly in the IDE that will help you to take a right decision. So for example, if you think about the libraries, dependencies of your application, so from the security point of view, how do you know that the one library is more secure than the other? How do you know that there is no kind of vulnerability that has been recently discovered that affects the library you want to use? Or how do you know that the library you are using, it has some dependencies, some hundreds dependencies further that requires some license that you need to purchase? Nowadays you don't have this information in your IDE, so you either search or you skip that. And with that data-driven development approach, this data should be available to you in IDE. The AI assistance is more or less, so I will give you the example that I also have here. So if you imagine you are an artist and painter, so you are painting like, I don't know, Bitwa pod Grunwaldem. So you think that who painted this Bitwa pod Grunwaldem? Matejko, was it? Okay, so you believe that Matejko did all this? He painted this image himself, everything, from from the like white board to the full picture. Actually, I don't know it, but it is very likely that he was some guys there were some guys who were like painting the background for him, which finally was not even seen. Yes, which take them like a lot of time, but was really kind of not really creative part of creating the picture. And basically with AI assistance, it is expected to be the same. So those tools should be built in the way that all this kind of housekeeping and this boring stuff that you need to create and that can be automated should be automated. And you, as a real artist, you developers as a real artist, you should just focus on really doing the creative part of the stuff. So really building the functionalities that you supposed to do. So these are our 10 bets that we are expecting will happen. And actually, now you might ask question if this is something that we are expecting to happen in 5 years, in 10 years, or not. So the answer is that this is really happening now. So this was more or less the reason why Red Hat has acquired Codenv over a year ago. So now, if we look on the tooling that we have available, so IDEs, so we can expect, or we can say that now we have like 3 kind of tools. So we have desktop tools, so the tools that you install locally on your desktop. We have container native tools, so the tools that could be installed on your desktop or could be remote, so installed somewhere in the cloud. But they are like focusing on container native application development. So they support you in developing this kind of container first or container native applications. And then there is a new kind of tooling that is expected to be built and to run as a service, either in public or in private cloud. And in regards to the to Red Hat and to the community around Red Hat, we can name those tools. Desktop tools, we have like Dev Studio, which is well-known development environment that is offered by Red Hat for many years, based on Eclipse. We also cooperate with Microsoft on Visual Studio, so there are some plugins that you can deploy to that tool. Then we have the new tooling, OpenShift Duo, which is command line interface for building container native applications. Eclipse Share, which is basically the key component here. So this is this web-based IDE with all this data-driven support for decisions, and basically most of the ideas that I shared with you are implemented in this tool. And then there is a code ready, which is basically extending the IDE, which includes Eclipse Share, but also it extends the idea, the functionality to be able to manage the whole life cycle of your application. So from the idea up to the deployment. And then if we look on the key functionality, so Polyglot is expected to be supported by all the tools. Development in containers and the reduction of need for setting up the workspace and the management of your development environments, which by the way has been measured in some organization, and it can even take up to like 20-25% of developers' time is just to work on the management of the IDEs. So if you have that challenge, then probably it's worth to spend some time to try to reduce that time. Okay, so the tools, the tools are, I would say they are, or they are already available, or they are just behind the corner. So, if you know Cube, ADM, so you know how complex and how many commands you need to make to deploy some app. So with ODO, this supposed to be easier. So this is command line tool with some very simplified semantics, so that you can easily create and build and deploy application in OpenShift, which, as you probably already know, is our enterprise Kubernetes implementation. Then we have the Eclipse. So Eclipse has been developed for quite some time. So if you go simply to if you Google and find Eclipse, you will see you can download it, you can install it. It is also developed as a container native application. So it runs as a set of containers either in plain Docker or in Kubernetes or in OpenShift. And basically, when you install it, you need just on your workstation your browser, so you can try if this has been done well or not in your opinion, if you will find it useful. For me it was quite interesting experience to start playing with that tooling. We also going to provide like full environment where you will be able not only to create a code, but also to build and deploy the code within one environment, which is of course OpenShift. And the last tooling here is called CodeReady toolchain. So this is something what you can try to access at OpenShift.io. So this is basically a full environment that combines not only the OpenShift and Eclipse, but also it combines the tooling for managing your project. So basically creating some boards like Kanban boards or some agile stories, and to really have the full visibility over the process from the idea to basically the deployment within the OpenShift environment. And this is pretty much we get to the end of my presentation. So this is not the blood, don't worry. Here is a painter here. Yeah, so it is, it's open source. We love each other, and it's everything is okay. Nobody was hurt here. No victims. So if you are interested to listen again, this 10 ideas, to hear it from the guy who even has like invented some of them or has been closer. I put here a link to the YouTube video where you can watch the session that has been presented for the first time on Red Hat Summit conference back in May this year. And that's it from my side. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you find it inspiring.